Hello, everybody. Well, I am back in my normal setup here, which means I can begin my series of videos where I talk about each individual episode of The Witcher Netflix Season 1. I've already done a little bit of discussion about my overall thoughts on the show, about my thoughts on different characters in the show, but I really just wanted to have a series of videos where I just kind of talk about the episodes individually, not really like an in-depth breakdown, but just a discussion, some of my personal observations, the things that I did like, the things maybe that I didn't like as much, and yeah, just a place for me to talk about each episode. So let's begin with Season 1, Episode 1, The End's Beginning. So I actually love this opening scene with the Kikimora looked a little weird, but I don't think it was honestly terrible or anything like that. My first experience with this show was just, I was at a fan event and then watching it in theaters. So this opening scene was actually pretty impactful for me because it made me realize that, oh man, we're really doing this. We are doing a Witcher Netflix show. Like, it's here. Oh my God, I can't believe it. But I'd actually just really like this scene. This scene specifically.
Today isn't your day, is it?
The line that Geralt says here, and then when it kind of moves into the open intro of the show. Yeah, I just really like the music and everything. So I just wanted to just point that out because this just got me really, really hyped for this first episode. And I thought overall this was actually a good like pilot intro episode. The way that they introduce the world, they don't really give you a lot of information. And for somebody who doesn't know anything about The Witcher, I bet this is, you don't know how Witchers are viewed in the world. You don't know anything about Geralt. But this like opening scene in the bar kind of gives you that instant click of, oh, okay, Witchers are not really liked in a lot of the world. And yeah, it's kind of more of a subtle introduction to the universe. But I want to talk a little bit about Renfri. They did pretty spot on job of what her story is, the Curse of the Black Sun and everything like that. So Andrzej Sapkowski, a lot of his stories have some derivatives from either folk or fairy tales. Renfri is a lot of Snow White, believe it or not. So what is it? She goes off to Mahakam in her backstory to get 7 gnomes, not 7 dwarves, 7 gnomes, and her evil stepmother, or her stepmother, who doesn't really like her a lot, tries to kill her many times, and one of the attempts is with a poison apple. So the minute I read that, I was like, okay, this is basically a Snow White derivative. Those are just some things I had kept in mind when thinking of Renfri, and yeah, I love the way she's portrayed here. So then we have the scene where Geralt enters into Master Irian, or Stregabor's tower, Master Irian's old tower, and now Stregobor has taken over. Again, this was accurate to the books, and this is one of those scenes that was like an exact picture of how I pictured it in my head. And so I was pretty pleased with this scene, because it is very similar to how it was written in the story. So when people say that like the adaptation was not that good, I always like remember these little scenes that were almost like mirror matches of what I had pictured in my head, and that makes me happy as a book reader. And it's in this scene that we get the very famous quote from this story from Geralt, the "evil is evil" quote.
Evil is evil, Stregobor. Lesser, greater, middling. It's all the same.
So I want to read the actual a quote of this line from the book, because it's just like it's when I first heard this, I was just like, yes, this is so great. It's a really great line, but it's also really important Like, I actually think this is a great first story to introduce us to Geralt and the world of The Witcher. You're establishing that he has this code where he's saying, if I have to choose between one evil or the other, I'd rather not choose at all. So it really paints a picture of who Geralt is and what it's like to be a Witcher. So this is the actual line from the book. "Evil is evil, Stregobor," said the Witcher seriously as he got up. "Lesser, greater, middling, it's all the same. Proportions are negotiated, boundaries blurred. I'm not a pious hermit. I haven't done only good in my life. But if I'm to choose between one evil and another, then I prefer to not choose at all. Time for me to go. We'll see each other tomorrow."
Cats and children noticed him first. A striped tomcat sleeping on a sun-warmed stack of wood shuddered, raised his round head, pulled back his ears, hissed, and bolted off into the nettles.
So before we continue to part 2 of the Lesser Evil story, we do get a bit of a time skip where we are shown a little bit of Sintra and Ciri's story. It actually is very impactful to show Ciri and her escaping Sintra, the fall of Sintra, showing Calanthe's death. I think these are all really good things to have in a first episode. Even though the timeline is a little confusing, this is a major story point, and it really does make a big impact on the show. I feel that it does. You're understanding that this isn't just a world of monster hunting and stories and adventures from Geralt. This is a world of politics and war and brutality beyond the brutality that we see with Geralt. There's actual war and kingdoms that are being destroyed. So I think that it was actually very important for this to be shown in the first episode, even though it is a little confusing with the timeline. And yeah, so we get a little bit of an attachment to Queen Calanthe and Iced and Ciri here, and I think that's really, really good, because it is a short amount of time that we get to see them before everything goes to hell, basically. But they do a good job kind of making you connect a little bit with these characters. So you get a little bit of an idea of what it's like for this kingdom right now. And I actually just really like the way that this was all introduced. I had no real issues with this. And I thought this scene was really impactful as well, because the queen is getting the news that Nilfgaard is at their front doorstep in the middle of this nice banquet, and you can see the emotion in her face. And God, she's just such a great actress in this entire thing. So yeah, I really, really liked the way they introduced this, and I think that introducing this in the first episode was actually necessary. Even though Ciri's story does kind of get much slower and less impactful later on in the series, I think it was great for them to introduce this world in this way. Nilfgaard is invading, and there is war again. I was, my first time watching this, I was genuinely shocked that they were going there. I mean, we saw it in the trailer, but I was like, wow, okay, we're doing this episode 1. We are gonna have the Nilfgaard Sintra battle in episode 1. Okay. But again, like I said earlier, this establishes to the viewer that this is a world of war and brutality. And oh God, yeah, it is brutal. Okay, we're gonna we're gonna keep it here on Ciri and Mousak because yeah. And then seeing this scene again, it was all very short, to be completely honest. Like, everything's happening really quick. These aren't long battle scenes, but it's pretty much to the point. Like, you see the big things happening within these fight scenes in just a few seconds, and I'm honestly okay with that. I don't need like 5-episode long battle scenes. I think that just having it all in one episode was good. The fall of Sintra actually happens basically it happens during the first book of the Witcher saga, Blood of Elves, where most of the main stuff that's happening with like Geralt and Yennefer happens in the 2 earlier quote-unquote books, The Last Wish and Sword of Destiny. So the fall of Sintra happens much later, and we've established that already. But the show is actually, creating the fall of Sintra in a visual form, because the story of Sintra, the fall of Sintra, isn't actually like a narrative within the book. It's essentially mentioned. They talk about Queen Calanthe, that she killed herself and things like that. So after all of the Sintra scenes, we cut back to the final part of the story of the Butcher of Blaviken. And this is where he gets his infamous title, Butcher of Blaviken. And this particular fight scene is very quickly becoming one of the more famous and impactful scenes within the entire series from what I've seen online. People are, okay, oof, yeah. It's another very, very violent fight scene. It is a very, very well choreographed and very well done fight scene overall. I think the fighting style is very interesting because from what we know of Geralt in the books, and these are all minor criticisms, things that don't necessarily bother me, but I've seen it kind of bother other people, that, you know, Geralt is actually, he's more of a scrawnier, smaller built individual. Many times when Andrzej Sapkowski is describing Geralt fighting, he uses terms like pirouette, which in my mind is a very like a very dancing type of maneuvers that he does when he's fighting. This shows that a little bit, but it is very much showing his strength, I think, more than his prowess. I also wanted to read a small excerpt from The Lesser Evil of the fight between Renfri and Geralt, because it's one of the fights that I actually really enjoyed reading within this entire book. I feel that the two of them fighting was almost like art. She knew the trick and turned with him, their bodies so close he could feel the touch of her breath as she ran the edge across his chest. He felt a twinge of pain, ignored it. He turned again in opposite direction, deflected the blade flying towards his temple, made a swift, feint, and attacked. Renfri sprang away as if to strike from above as Geralt lunged and swiftly slashed her exposed thigh and groin from below with the very tip of his sword. When he does kill her, this is the description in the book. She didn't cry out. Falling to her side, she dropped her sword and clutched her thigh. Blood poured through her fingers in a bright stream over her decorated belt, elk leather boots, and onto the dirty flagstones. The clamor of the swaying crowd crammed in the streets grew as they saw blood. I realize I'm also really bad at reading out loud. It's been a while since I had to read a book out loud, so please forgive me for my terrible reading.
The girl in the woods will be with you always. She's your destiny.
So they went ahead and added those lines in, and it's kind of a random thing. She kind of like prophesizes essentially about Ciri to Geralt. I don't understand why. The only thing I can see why they did this is because Renfri does seem to have a strong impact on Geralt as a character for this show. In this show, I actually feel like they take a big significance on Renfri and Geralt. And he mentions her many times later on in the show, more than I'd like that for him to do. So when she says this, to me, it's like, okay, she's kind of like prophesizing this thing, and it makes her more of an important character than she is, I feel. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you guys, if any of you watching this might have gotten something different from this, but I was a little confused as to why she's essentially prophesizing his destiny. And they mentioned the girl in the woods, and in my mind, I was thinking Broccolon, and that Geralt would meet Ciri and Broccolon, but he ended up not meeting Ciri and Broccolon, and that's a whole other thing we'll get to when the time comes later on in the episodes. So those are my thoughts. Overall, I give this first episode a big thumbs up. I think it was a strong introduction to the series, and it made me want to watch more. It made me want to watch the entire series in one sitting, which is almost what I did. So let me know your thoughts on episode 1. I've heard a bit of a mix of things. Some people weren't completely sold with this first episode, and it took them several episodes in to actually like get into the show. And then other people were like floored by this first episode and they were like, I need more. So what are your thoughts? I want to know. Were you absolutely floored by the first episode, or were you lukewarm, or did you absolutely hate it? I don't know. For me personally, I have to say I was on the more enthusiastic side of things, where I was like, yes, this is great. Give me more. So that's it for me for this episode. I will see you guys next week, where we will talk about episode 2. All right. Bye, guys.